Sean Culey is the Executive Vice President of Manucor and is based in the UK. Sean is a recognized strategic advisor, business transformation expert, keynote speaker, and author, focusing on helping companies develop compelling value propositions and strategies that get executed. Sean has 25 years of global experience across numerous verticals and geographies, including a decade working for Cadbury Schweppes as a global design authority for what was the world's largest SAP implementation. Sean is also a member of the European leadership team of the Apex Supply Chain Council and a certified SCORE Master Instructor, SCORE P. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming back to the SAPEX stage, Sean Culey.
Good morning. That was the longest introduction ever, I think. Can I have the recording of that? I think I want to take it everywhere I go. Good morning. Thank you, Mungo. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to be invited back here to South Africa for the SAPEX event, and a real privilege to do the morning introductory keynote. So I best not screw it up then, really, have I? I've got about that much material and about that much time, so I've got one question for you, because I'm going to go through this at speed. Are you ready? Jolly good. I'm going to start with possibly the most important chart you're ever likely to see. And this shows, since behavioral modern humans, back from the age of the Egyptians, all the way up to around about 200 years ago, by our own internal KPIs, our measures of success, how many of us there are, how long we live, how much wealth we generate, how much societies develop, despite all the chaos that's gone before, all the wars, all the empires, all the great religions that rise, pretty much nothing changed. Up until this point here, when something did change. So if I put it into supply chain terms, around about here, suddenly the value of our inventory went up, the volume went up exponentially, our shelf life expanded, but the number of turns decreased. What happened? What happened was we learned. We learned how to take natural forces, put them together with engineering in order to create engines. Engines that allowed us to take water from mines, that allowed us to get coal from the ground to power more engines that drove industry. And that bent the curve of human history to the point where now, 200 years later, we have beaten the Malthusian tragedies of wondering whether or not we'll ever have enough food to feed ourselves, to where obesity is now the biggest issue facing the world today. And I want to understand why this happened. And to do that, you have to understand capitalism. We have to understand market forces. And there's two economists here who've done a good job of trying to explain it. The first one, Nikolai Kondratyev, was a Soviet economist, and his explanation wasn't particularly well received because he was employed by Joseph Stalin in Soviet Russia to explain why the Great Depression signaled the death of capitalism, and obviously communism was the future. And Nikolai did his research, and he basically went to Joseph and said, Joseph, I've done my research. I hate to tell you this, but I actually think capitalism comes in waves, and I think we're just about to reach the end of the third wave of capitalism. And Joseph said, Nikolai, I don't think you quite understood the brief, son. What I wanted you to prove was that capitalism was finished, Great Depression means the end of capitalism, and actually what we're facing here is communism. Communism is the future. And Nikolai said, yes, but Joseph, I don't quite believe that's true. And he said, well, in that case, I think you should spend the next 5 years in the Gulag, and then I'll kill you. His work was buried, and it became found by this chap here, Joseph Schumpeter, an Austrian economist. And he wanted to know why. Why does this happen? And there's two actors at play here. The entrepreneur and their innovations. And he named it creative destruction, the forces of creative destruction. And it looks a bit like this. So if you use the product life cycles or Rogers' diffusion of innovation, they all look very similar, because they all are very similar, only this is a 60-year life cycle. And at the start here, you can see there's innovation. Innovations become into industry, they get adopted, they diffuse, and then we start to actually saturate and rebirth. And actually what's happening here at the front of the curve, there's a whole load of different behaviors. Behaviors of experimentation, of innovation, of invention, and at the back, it's more about exploitation and efficiencies. And we've just seen this. A lot of businesses are still in this mindset of sweating our assets, of offshoring labor, of getting more cost out of the supply chain, when in fact we're in a new wave. And when we look back since the Industrial Revolution, you can see that each one of these waves brought with it new power sources, new transport mechanisms, new communication mechanisms, and they created new industries. And as we all know, in very recent history, the fifth K wave collapsed. We had headlines like this. George Bush looked a bit like that. Merkel had a face like that, and the Aussies thought they got away with it. Okay. The whole process of creative destruction is speeding up. It's speeding up at an exponential rate. What's driven the fifth wave has been something called Moore's Law. So that every 18 months to 2 years, the number of chips get on the transistor doubles, the price halves, and it's actually enabled us to move from a world where actually, like in 1980, for $3,500, you can get 10 megabytes of data. This year, you can go onto Amazon and get a terabyte for $54.99, which means the price per gigabyte has changed from $349,500 to 5 cents, which is 100,000 times more memory for just 1.5% of the cost. Now that's exponential. 51 years ago, in the Industrial Revolution, it took 51 years for creative destruction to happen. So for Thomas Newcomen's atmospheric engine to be improved by James Watt, it was a 51-year gap. Now, in just 20 years, everything you see on that image now fits in your pocket. That's the difference. And in fact, globalization has allowed us to diffuse these innovations at a faster rate. Before, it was very much localized. It was localized to Europe and Germany, then the US, but now we're in the global world. So where it took 75 years for the telephone to reach 50 million users, 38 years for radio, 13 years for TV, 4 years for the internet, 3.5 years for Facebook, and just 19 days for Pokemon Go. Yeah. It's also turning certainties into absurdities. So things we say that we believe to be true, we find out very quickly afterwards we were talking rubbish. Great example, two of the most clever people on the planet, Levy and Moraine, one from Harvard, one from MIT, I believe, wrote a book called The New Division of Labor. And The New Division of Labor was all about how the computer age is changing the very nature of work. But they said, with statements of certainty, there are certain things that are just too difficult. They will never be computerized because they involve so many different variables that there's no way a computer is ever going to be able to program these number of different things that are happening. So there are certain things I can say that will never happen. And the example they gave was like doing a left-hand turn onto oncoming traffic. 6 years later, Google said, hey, come have a ride in our car, which did exactly that. So in 6 years, a statement of absolute certainty was made to look absurd. Imagine suggesting just a decade ago that there would be hundreds of thousands of people worldwide that would own cars that would be able to drive themselves, park themselves, be summoned by your phone, use electricity for fuel, do 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Gosh, I so want one of these cars. Refuel yourself in your garage, drive for 300 miles on a single charge, and be upgraded automatically while I slept. So when I woke up, I had a smarter car than when I went to bed. By a company you've never heard of, and which wouldn't even start making a production car until 5 years from now. Would you believe them? I suggest that most wouldn't. We are now at the transition point between the old wave, the fifth wave, and the sixth. And these are disruptive times. And all of these forces going on, what I've heard called several hundred times the VUCA forces, of uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity and volatility are acting on us right now because we're in a transition. And I really like this quote from Beth Comstock here, who said, get used to living in the in-between. The old is going away and the new has not yet fully emerged. It's uncomfortable and it's chaotic, but it's happening in pretty much every industry right now. Anyone here from any industry who feels like life is exactly as it always has been and it's very calm at the moment? Didn't think so. So what does life in the transition point look like? This comes from originally, it was an article in TechCrunch by Tom Goodwin, and I've stolen a little bit of this. But now, in the transition point, the world's largest taxi company owns no vehicles. The most popular media owner creates no content. The world's most valuable retailer holds no inventory. The largest accommodation provider owns no real estate. The largest communication companies have no infrastructure. And the world's largest movie house doesn't even own any cinemas. This is the world in the transition point. We're now in a world where a 5-year-old company that makes an app that hails a car is now worth more than the companies that make the cars. And I don't even want to start on what that guy's up to. but it's really, really hurting you if you're in the retail business. It's causing a retail apocalypse in the US at the moment. So you can see here the old companies, last decade, companies like Sears, like JCPenney, 96% drop in their market value over 10 years, with Amazon 1,934%. And that was in 2016. His stock has grown 33% in the last 6 months alone. And if you've read the headlines, it's just gone over $1,000 a share. We're now in a world where the digital and the e-commerce world is encroaching on the physical, and it's hurting it bad. Where people are using shops for advice and then going online to buy whatever they've just seen. However, we're all supply chain guys. The global supply chain is still very much a human supply chain. And in fact, if you look at these two images, we're about 100 years apart, there's still rows of people stood there doing repetitive tasks. So one in the US, and one in China there, but they're doing the same sort of thing for now. Because I want to talk about the impact of creative destruction on the supply chain. And I want you to say, you need to start getting ready for the technological triple whammy. And it looks a bit like this. Whammy number one, we are facing a world of robotics replacing muscle across the end-to-end supply chain. I'm going to take you through that. Number two is the automation of knowledge work. And number three is the convergence, where machines are running machines. Let me take you through this. So let's start with the end-to-end supply chain. As an APIC Supply Chain Council member, I think I shall use the APIC Supply Chain Council definitions of source, make, deliver, and sell. Let's go to source. Start with farming. Now, farming's always had robots of some description in it, but usually things like threshing machines, anything that doesn't involve nimble fingers. But we've always felt that farming, even though 80–90% of, certainly in the Western world, used to work in farming, and now only less than 5% do. There are certain things you're always going to need migrant labor for. We're going to need people to pick things out of the ground, strawberries, lettuces, fragile fruit that a machine would damage. Until now. So again, statements of certitude. Machines will never be able to do this. It's been made absurd. And in fact, what we're working on now is saying, why do we even need land? So over in Japan, they have an indoor farming centers. Companies are actually dedicating floors to the building to growing fresh fruit, fresh vegetables that are going straight down to the canteens and actually for the people to eat during the day. 30,000 heads of lettuce being generated and cut every single day. No humans doing it. And of course, because they're making it inside, there's 95% less water, no pesticides, herbicides, no seasons, and no contamination. And in fact, now we're looking at robots to see if we can do the things of nature, because there's a bee apocalypse going on at the moment, so companies are looking at creating small little robots that can actually help pollinate plants. What about mining, digging stuff out of the ground? Again, robotics over the last 5 or 6 years has really gone onto this country, gone onto this area. Let's look at Australia. We'll go to Australia right away. I want to go to Perth. This chap's from Sheffield in the UK, I know because I've seen a video about him. He's controlling a mine that's 1,500 kilometers away, which he's never been to. And he's able to do that, of course, because all of the vehicles, all the mining vehicles, are autonomous. And in fact, Rio Tinto has been so successful with its autonomous mine, it said, well, we now load it onto trains and we send it across the coast to go around to China and the rest of the world. Why don't we make the train autonomous as well? So they've done that. And of course, if you can do it for iron ore, you can also do it for coal. And in fact, if you can make something autonomous, it doesn't mean it needs light, so you can go underground and drive underground. So Volvo have recently introduced a whole series of trucks to work underground. Now we've took stuff out of the ground, we've moved it to our ports, now we've got to take it somewhere. Well, Rolls-Royce says, why do we need people on ships? Why don't we just make the ships autonomous? It's very hard to hold hostages if there's no people on the ship. So they're working towards an autonomous shipping fleet. And by 2035, the prediction is that the entire shipping fleet will be autonomous. If you fly things, for years we've said, you know, does the pilot actually ever do anything? Does it fly itself? Well, now we're going to make sure there isn't a pilot in the plane. So Airbus are working on that. And then it gets to the ports. Rotterdam was the first port to try this, a fully autonomous port. And if I had a little bit longer, I'd show you the video. But it's not Rotterdam anymore. It's now Australia, Melbourne, India, China, Abu Dhabi, US, even Nigeria, all making their ports completely autonomous. All of the movements of the containers, putting them away, loading them up, is being handled completely by robots. That's good to make. It's good to make processes. Now, we've had robots for a long time in manufacturing, but they're usually big, they're dumb, they have to be put in cages because if you get in the way, they'll kill you. They do one thing repetitively. But robots are getting smart.
Will people and robots someday compete for jobs? At 8:30 one morning, a group of new employees takes part in daily morning exercises. They are 13 humanoid workers called Next Stage. This company began using the robots in earnest last year. They have 2 eyes and are just like humans. They're cute.
You say that now.
This factory manufactures money sorting machines for cash registers. The humanoids work on a production line that was previously manned entirely by humans. The robot visually confirms the parts set in place by a human worker. Then it begins its task.
So they're next stage robots. But I want to introduce you to something smarter. It's called Baxter, and it was produced in 2012 by a guy called Rodney Brooks. Rodney Brooks set up a company called Rethink Robotics. You might remember Rodney as the gent who he invented the Roomba. So if you've seen these vacuum cleaners that travel around your house and vacuum stuff, he was the inventor of that. And he was given a task and some budget by the US government to create sort of next generation of robotics, which is called Baxter. This is smart robotics. They call them cobots now, collaborative robotics. Let me introduce you to Baxter.
Think adding automation to your production line limits you to high cost, high volume, caged robots. Think automation requires specialized robots programmed by highly trained engineers. Well, think again. Baxter breaks out from the protective cages that contain many manufacturing robots, allowing people and robots to work side by side, doing what each does best. From machine tending to line loading to packing and unpacking, Baxter has the flexibility to be deployed and redeployed on tasks with minimal setup or integration cost. Whether there's increased customer demand or the introduction of a new product, Baxter helps you create a collaborative workforce, one with increased productivity and efficiency. Think about getting all this for a base price of $25,000. That translates into an ROI of months, not years. Now think about what Baxter could add to your plan. Rethink manufacturing. Rethink what's next. Rethink robotics.
Baxter also has a brother called Sawyer. Sawyer is a machine that's used for doing very, very detailed work, so it's got 7 points of movement, things that large companies like Foxconn, for example, used to do lots of for people who make mobile phones, companies like Apple, very, very detailed electric component manufacture. And it's been rolled out and used in a number of different industries. And the thing about Baxter is, it's a platform. So previously, robots did one thing. They were programmed to do one thing. This is a platform, so it has software updates, and you basically just guide it, and it can do anything. You can change the adapter, you can change the gripper. So MIT and other universities are picking it up and playing around with it and basically saying, this example here is a soft gripper which allows it to pick up things like paper, like eggs, really, really fragile things. And the latest update of Baxter has force sensitivity, so it knows exactly when it's feeling something. So it allows it to be used in 100 different industries, thousands of different industries. You basically have a platform that you adapt to your use. And the thing about platforms is platforms get smarter. You think about your smartphone that you bought in 2008 compared to today's smartphone. Well, ultimately, it's the same looking thing, but the software has increased dramatically. Moore's law has kicked in. And I know when I showed originally the video of Baxter back in 2012, 2013, when I started doing these presentations, people said, yeah, it's a bit slow, Sean. You know, I think a human worker could do that faster. And they probably were right. So as an example, in 2013, Integra software took 3 minutes 20 to do a very simple exercise. The exercise was basically to lift things up, put it in a box, put a partitioner on a box, put the more things in, close the box up. 1 year later, it took 1 minute 12. That's exponential. It takes us around 50,000 years to evolve and do things any faster. It took Baxter 12 months. That's what we're up against now. And now we're on Integra 5. There's 3 more versions of that software, so you can imagine what it's like now. But one of the things it said, they didn't say in Rethink Robotics advert at the end there, was rethinking robotics, was that you said rethink reshoring and offshoring. Because this is one of the big benefits of it. And this is where a lot of manufacturers, specifically in the Western economy, specifically in the US, small manufacturers able to use robotics at a price point of $25,000, which basically means even if you're on $5 a day in the other side of the world, you're still more expensive than a Baxter that works for the cost of electricity. And by the way, it doesn't join unions, doesn't take holidays, doesn't need to sleep, doesn't need to eat, doesn't smoke cigarettes. You know. So we've got all these competitive advantages for using robots. And actually what's happening is it's now moved in the reshoring revolution where manufacturing is coming home. So here we have Adidas, you know, making shoes completely by robots. The sole is 3D printed. I'm going to show you this later. The top is weaved by robots. And in fact, we're getting to the point where the factory itself is becoming the product, and the companies with the best factories win. So Tesla here, you know, Elon Musk, the Tesla Master Plan Part 2 got released last year. And he says, this is why Tesla engineering has transitioned to focus heavily on designing the machine that makes the machine, turning the factory itself into the product. 3D printing, of course, we've been talking about this now for a little while. Most of the time we talk about it as making small things like components. Weapons is an interesting one. I don't know if you remember the imagery of the sort of white plastic gun that they made quite quickly, and everyone sort of lost their minds over it. Well, that's a fully working metal gun up there, which you can now 3D print. Components, spare parts. If you're in the spare part industry or service industry into, I don't know, General Electric or BAE Systems or any heavy construction, I'd be worried right now, because what they're going to want from you is the design, the schematic. They're going to make the parts as they need them, because actually you cost them a lot of money holding stuff just in case. Now what we're going to move to is a world where we make things when we need them. We can also make big things. This is so-called BAM, Big Area Additive Manufacturing. So this is industrial scale 3D printing. So what can I make with industrial style and scale 3D printing? Well, I can make cars. This is Local Motors. It makes a fully 3D printed car, or motorbikes. We can make even bigger things, like bridges. 3D printing in mid-air over water. But what about bigger things? What about houses? This is China. It was really interesting, this. When I talked about the possibility of 3D printing houses a couple of years ago, I think probably the last time I was here, actually, in 2014, there was a Californian professor who was talking about something called contour crafting, about layering concrete and making houses using 3D printers. The interesting thing, while he was touring the universities and discussing this innovation that he believed we would one day be able to create, the Chinese had used it, made it, and were selling the houses. So we now got houses, multi-story houses, 5-story apartment blocks now being made. All of these you see here, from very modular approaches where they just tried to see if they could make 10 houses in a day, and they did, down to very, very complicated villas like that, are all now completely 3D printed. You also make complex things. From jet engines, which is why General Electric has invested 1.4 billion in European additive manufacturing firms. So again, as I said a moment ago, if you're in the supply chain to companies like GE and you make components and spare parts, I'd be worried right about now. Dragonfly 2020, this is printing parts with electric components inside them. So we're now able to print electrical components. So chipboards, silicon, anything that goes inside a mobile phone can be prototyped and tested right in front of you in less than 10 minutes. So imagine before we used to have to send parts off to Foxconn or somewhere like that in China, make it 6 weeks later, it'd come back. No, that's not right, send it back again. Now we're able to just do prototyping of electronic components right in front of you. Even down to things like this, and these sort of 3D scans and molds. But what about really complex things? What about us? What about printing us? So we're now actually working with biological materials. L'Oreal at the bottom here has teamed up with Organovo a couple of years ago, this is now, to 3D print skin tissue. So one of the big criticisms of the healthcare industry is animal testing. You know, we test cosmetics on animals. Now we're testing it on human skin, just not a human attached to it. Through to, you know, that poor chap at the top there has had half his face eaten away with a cancerous tumor. We're now able to, you know, match his face and create 3D print implants that go onto his face that gives him a normal life. I mean, the really exciting or scary thing, depends which way you look at it, is printing biological material, like our own organs, using DNA as ink. An Israeli startup here, again, Nano Dimension, being able to print stem cells. Even new forms of 3D printing. Have a look at this.
Welcome to Carbon. We're a technology company changing the way the world makes things. Specifically, 3D printed things. We didn't start out trying to change manufacturing forever.
We didn't?
No, we didn't.
We started with the simple goal of making 3D printed parts better.
It's 25 to 100 times faster, which is game-changing.
But we quickly realized that with our combination of technology and materials, we could make real parts with mechanical properties and surface finishes that make injection molded plastics obsolete by comparison. Embracing the idea that speed to production isn't an obstacle anymore. It's the only way forward. And our partners share our enthusiasm for reinventing the rules. Partners who are manufacturing at scale, making millions of real products.
Like us?
Yeah, like you. In partnership with Adidas, we've created a midsole that shouldn't exist so that they could make a shoe that shouldn't exist. Light, super flexible, highly durable, and printed straight from liquid. A marvel of design and function, this shoe defies logic. And whether you want to make 1 or 1 million, this is true, customizable, and on-demand mass manufacturing. This is not a publicity stunt. This is a revolution. And we're just getting started. Stop prototyping, start producing.
This Carbon, these guys were inspired by the Terminator 2 movie. Do you remember the scene in Terminator 2 where there was the liquid metal and the T-1000 came out of the liquid metal? That was their goal, really, to try and create that. Could we take liquid and turn it into solid form? And they've done it. And they've done it. So even 3D printing has been disrupted. But this is going to drive towards an on-demand manufacturing. And what they're doing there is an intersection of hardware and software and molecular science all coming together, or as I like to call it, magic. We're now into 4D printing as well. So this is programmable materials. These are materials that are programmed to act in a certain way under certain conditions, from water pipes that expand and contract based on the pressure on it. So we're actually printing intelligent materials, materials that will assemble themselves under instruction or when applied to water. And it's driving an on-demand manufacturing revolution. So this is a patent from Amazon that's just been released. In the US, you apply for a patent, you get a couple of years where it's secret, and then it comes out. This is Amazon basically saying, we have applied for patents to do on-demand manufacturing for clothing. So what they're trying to do is, you order a shirt, and then they make it for you. And you probably get it in a couple of hours. So it's asking some big questions as a supply chain, like, would we need to store much stuff in the future? And people are picking up on this. You know, digital manufacturing could eliminate warehouses, create on-demand production. What about delivery? What's happening in delivery? Not an area that's had a lot of robotics usually, but this is changing. The warehouse is becoming automated. So you may have seen these before. These are Kiva bots. They were bought by Amazon. So let's have a quick look at those. Why would they do that? Why would Amazon spend so much money buying a robotics company when it's just a retailer? Why would it want to buy robotics? Well, there's obviously a massive economical cost for that. It takes 44 cents for every item to be picked by a human being. That drops to 21 cents by robots, so that's a 47% drop. Deutsche Bank predicts that by Amazon rolling that out across the 110 warehouses it has, it saves at $2.5 billion per year. And what does Amazon do with that money? Reinvest it into buying more robots, smarter robots, new ways of reaching out to consumers. Also helps them to increase the responsiveness. There's less than a minute's worth of human labor required in fulfilling every order. That's what you're up against, ladies and gentlemen. What about moving stuff from the warehouse? Back in 2012, this chap here was the governor of California, signing some paperwork. The guy looking over his shoulder with the dodgy-looking glasses is Sergey Brin from Google. I always use this joke because I find it quite amusing. Who was the previous governor of California right up until that point? Arnold Schwarzenegger. This guy's signing the paperwork to allow autonomous cars on the road. So I think it would be fantastic if the Terminator signed the paperwork that allowed robots on our roads. That'd just be a newspaper headline right there, wouldn't it? But of course, we all know about autonomous cars. But what's happening now is, of course, you know, they're getting smart, and companies that use a lot of human labor in order to move people around are now saying, hey, with these vehicles, we don't need the human quite so much. And they're getting smarter. So Tesla released, via a software update, while you slept, a software update to its car. So I went to bed, my car was just a normal car, even though it was a very smart electric one. I woke up, it was autonomous. How cool is that? They reported very quickly that it got smarter. Because what's happening here is Teslas collect more data than any other car on the road, a factor of 10. And Tesla, because it's electric, has a huge economic and competitive advantage over other companies. An electric car gets plugged in every night. Because it's plugged in, its software can be updated. Now, if you've got a combustion engine, software can either be updated when it's in the garage or when it's on the move. If you've had to use any IT in the past, you don't want to update your IT while you're driving the car. So it's limited, really, for when the car goes in for a service, whereas Tesla is consistently updating its software. And people reported very quickly, this is getting smarter. Well, why was it getting smarter? Was it just picking up on me, the driver, my bad habits, and correcting them? No, it was collecting data from every Tesla Model S driver, taking it back to its central hub, programming it, and updating every single Tesla out there. So it was learning from everybody that had a Tesla car. And the more people who are driving Teslas, the smarter it's getting and the quicker it's getting smarter. And it's teaching each other how to drive. A couple of recent tweets from Elon Musk there, showing how the technology is getting smarter. So basically saying here, you know, did a little video, an example of how Tesla's works, and he said, well, the reason it skipped that parking spot was because it picked up the fact there was the disable sign there. So it knew you weren't disabled, so it didn't park there. And you can summon the car from the other side of the country, and it will come to you, just using your phone. The cost, of course, dropped significantly. So the cost per mile of being in a San Francisco taxi is $2.25. An autonomous vehicle takes that down to just the 25 cents. CEO of Uber here saying, you're not just paying for the car, you're also paying for the other dude in the car. If there's another dude in the car, the cost of taking Uber becomes cheaper than owning a vehicle. So we can get rid of the driver, the costs drop down enormously, which means a lot of people are going to say, so why am I spending a lot of money on this depreciation asset that sits outside my house 95% of the time, doing nothing? Why don't I just summon a vehicle with my phone? So that's going to be a bit of disruption. Logistics, move to logistics. Because this technology works for cars, it also works for lorries. It also works for trucks. And of course, it's already been used. So we've got Freightliner, Daimler Freightliner service already operating in the US. Otto, a startup coming from the guys from Google and Uber together, already done deliveries of Budweiser across the country. And the thing about Otto is, this is not a brand new vehicle. They're retrospectively able to upgrade existing vehicles and turn them autonomous. So you don't have to buy a new rig. What about the last mile? Now, the last mile has always been the most expensive. Now, as you just saw in that little Amazon video, drones been talked about. I mean, Jeff Bezos went on to ABC News, did a little thing about we're going to deliver stuff by drones. Everyone laughed at him and said that's just a big PR stunt. It wasn't a PR stunt. In fact, Alibaba now has beaten them to it. They've already done it. We've had pizzas being delivered to students in the US. We've had chicken sandwiches and Slurpees and all the other important stuff. The drone you saw in the Amazon video, that was a test that was done in the UK in December, so they did the very first deliveries out there. So it's happening. It's not a PR stunt. Technology is being used. This is Amsterdam. Amsterdam's full of canals. Canals are now just used for leisure, but actually they connect all the major cities together. So they've said, well, why don't we just put this technology on these existing infrastructure and move stuff back using the canals again? They're still there. We just don't use them anymore because people are expensive, but do we take the people out? So, and on the ground, Starship Robotics, pizza deliveries, that's basically got an oven in it. So that was when I was out in New Zealand back in the last year, that just came out. Domino's Pizza basically has an oven, so it's keeping your pizzas warm as it delivers it to you. Even the postman is being automated. Why companies like Daimler investing big money in this, though? So they've given $17.2 million to Starship Technologies that built one of those robots. And I want to show you why.
RoboVan partnership between Starship Technologies and Mercedes-Benz Vans creates the perfect synergy of transportation technologies for local delivery.
When the two transportation methods, robots and vans, converge into one, the result is the most efficient, cost-effective and convenient delivery system in the world.
The RoboVan is a first-in-the-world transportation system that comprises of self-driving delivery robots developed by Starship Technologies and Mercedes-Benz vans that act as a mothership, and are configured to allow robots to enter and exit autonomously during delivery stops in the local neighborhood.
The mothership concept is the combination of the intelligent and innovative van with the smart and agile robots of Starships. It will really be a quantum leap when it comes to last mile logistics.
The specially adapted Mercedes-Benz vans stop in designated areas in the local neighborhood for loading and unloading of the local fleet of delivery robots. For delivery to be carried out as efficiently as possible, the best stop for the van is calculated based on the location and the status of all the robots within the area. The RoboVan can hold 8 Starship delivery robots and has multiple baskets above the robots for storing the goods for that particular area. The robots autonomously drive into the van for loading by the driver, and once loaded, autonomously drive out the other side of the van for delivery to the customer. The loaded robots can thus be sent on their way as a free-floating robot fleet, to deliver their cargo safely and reliably within a radius of up to 2 miles. In the future, the innovative cooperation between Starship Technologies and Mercedes-Benz vans will ensure quick, on-demand and cost-effective delivery for consumers.
So this mothership concept of being able to drive to, the algorithms will determine the optimal location for the van to drop, and then the robots will scatter, come back, and then go off again. So they're using things, again, that people looked at that and gone, that'll never take off, no one will do that. They're doing it. There's more mothership concepts on the way. We talked about drones. Amazon has realized that actually the big thing about drones is they need to take off, and then they need to land. And actually there's a lot of energy and a lot of time. We have to locate the sensors, the logistics things in centers that are actually quite expensive. What about if we put it in the air? So let's talk about how we have an inventory basically on airships, and the drones basically scattering mothership style down to the people on the ground, and then going back up again. UPS is trying to fight back, so it's building trucks that have drones all built into it. They've been trialing this at the moment, so basically it just lifts up with the goods and just, again, parks itself, and then the drones scatter and deliver goods to customers. This isn't science fiction, this is happening right now. What about Cell? There's an area where we haven't seen much in the way of robotics, other than in science fiction films. Well, maybe science fiction films aren't fiction anymore.
Pepper is the first humanoid robot capable of recognizing the principal human emotions. He can adapt to any behavior and mood of his user. Use Pepper in hospitality care or retail. As a new way of welcoming and amusing your customers. He can help you find the right product or show you the way into the hospital. Pleasant and likable, Pepper is much more than a robot. He is a genuine humanoid companion created to communicate with you in the most natural and intuitive way, through his body movements and his voice.
Suggestion, sir. Maybe you might want to buy some flowers.
Pepper has numerous sensors and makes individual movements. Thanks to his face detection and built-in camera system, he can recognize any person in your customer's system and talk to them.
Make your choice, please. I will order it for you.
You can also personalize your robot by downloading the software applications that take your fancy. Learn, play, dance, and even chat in another language. Pepper adapts itself to you. Meet Pepper.
So that was Pepper. You saw it says Zorobots on there, but Zorobots is just a company that makes the software. So again, it's a platform. It's a platform that says, well, basically, let the software tell it what you want it to do. Do you want it to work in hospitality? Do you want it to work in retail? Do you want it to work at airports? Do you want it to be, whatever you want it to do, basically have software that programs it. And that's exactly what's happening. So it's being used in retail stores, cell phone stores, hospitals, airports at Oakland. You go into Oakland Airport now, you will see them. They're guiding people, telling them where to go. So they're using this technology effectively replace retail assistants, concierges, all these sorts of things. But automated stores. Back in 2012, Tesco's took over a company called Home Plus in South Korea. What you're looking at there are people buying stuff via the smartphones. Well, there's nothing really smart about that until you realize actually what that is the side of a train. It's a subway station. And they're using blank space in order to put up virtual imagery of products, and then with 2D barcodes allowing them to buy them, which means basically, I don't need expensive retail space. What I might need is just a pillar or a bus stop or something to turn that into a store. And then I can order it, and that'll be delivered by the time I get home. Amazon is reinventing the retail experience at the moment with Amazon Go. So this is a store that doesn't have any people in it, no queues. You basically just go in, pick up what you want, and walk out, and it knows what you've taken, and it records it. You have to be a Prime member, you have to scan yourself in, and it basically tracks you. So you pick something up, change your mind, put it back, and it updates your shopping basket as you do it. So it's a store without store assistance. And Amazon is driving the way, and anyone who's been at the executive review the last couple of days will know all about this, because I did a big session on this. One of the big things, the revolution, no one was asking for until they got it, and then everyone wants it once they have it, is Amazon Echo. So this is narrow artificial intelligence being introduced to the home. Most people think it's a speaker. It's not. It's a platform. It's a platform with a purpose. It's a purpose to attack every other online retailer by stopping you from going online to even order goods. So this is ordering stuff just by voice. Just say out loud what you want, and it arrives. And it's made at the heart of its strategy. So even Amazon saying, well, what about if they didn't even have to say out loud? What about if they just pressed the button? Or what about if the machine ordered for me? So it knew the water filter was low, it knew the printer was out of ink, and it just went and replenished itself. Amazon Dash Replenishment has already been going for 2 years. It's got around about 40 companies it works with at the moment. There's only 20 lines of code needed in order to turn its product to be autonomous. But of course, it only orders stuff through Amazon Prime. So if you're a Prime member, you get your stuff delivered, which means I don't even go online and compare the prices. It just automatically arrives. I didn't even know I was out of ink until the ink arrived. Boom. It's going well for Amazon. They reckon it's going to add 11 billion to its revenue by 2020, and it's not a poor company at the moment, as you probably know. Of course, to capture all this data, to capture all these signals, we need, like every other revolution, we need a communication protocol, and we need a transport. 5G is going to be here soon. They did some tests in Cambridge, also did some tests recently over in the University of Sydney, and they found like get the whole series of Game of Thrones in high definition downloaded in 10 seconds. I don't know about you, but I kind of want it now. So from the supplier's supplier to the person who serves the customer's customer, we're facing a world that potentially could be replaced by robots. Does this mean the death of blue-collar jobs? Is this our future? And you probably sat here thinking, gosh, I'm glad I've got more to trade than just the things on the end of my wristies. Well, you might want to think again. Because critical whammy number 2 is the automation of knowledge work. So here's something you may or may not have heard of, robotic process automation. So this is basically the automation of any repetitive task. AR, AP, order taking, anything that just basically rules-based is now being automated. And we've got companies like Amazon basically offering up prizes to people to say, if you can create a social bot that's so good it can enter into conversation so that people don't even know they're talking to a robot, we'll give you £2.5 million. So again, the call centers, people on the end of the phone, all of this sort of stuff is being automated. In fact, the whole transaction, so if robots make a move, the blockchain is going to be the thing that records the transactions. If you know a bit about blockchain. So it's given us full transparency into our supply chain. Talking about it for a little while now, it's getting very close to its tipping point where it's actually going to start to appear. Because data is now the new oil. We've generated more data in the last 2 years than we had done previously throughout history. And in fact, DNA could be the next oil drum. They finally can store data on DNA, huge amounts of data. For example, here we've got scientists recently stored a movie, a computer OS, and an Amazon gift card, which is very surreal, on a single speck of DNA. We've been talking about big data for a while. We've been talking about taking all this information and then being able to process it. And there is so much data, and we haven't even really started yet. The reason why Alexa was developed by Amazon was what they really wanted was data. They wanted to know what you wanted, be better than what you knew what you wanted. But we have to be able to process that data. So what good to you as a business person, as a company, as a supply chain, if you can't even manage small data? If your MRP settings aren't right, if your lead times are a joke, if your bill of materials is fictitious, if you can't manage that, what are you going to do with big data? So I suggest you focus on being able to manage that, because everyone else has. And the companies that have moved from recording what they've actually done, transactions, into being driven by insights. The trouble is, humans can't process that volume of data. We need time to analyze. We need time to digest and see the signals. And I quite like this particular cartoon, saying we've got all this big data, we've got these dashboards, and these software vendors have sold us all of this stuff, and do you know what? I'm just going to go and get pissed, because I can't handle it. We're going to need machines that learn. So 3 things that are driving it here. Cognitive computing. This is IBM's Watson. Anyone heard of this before? I'm sure a lot of you have. Yeah. IBM's Watson. This is cognitive computing. It's been applied to a number of different industries. and it's disrupting a number of different industries. And the industries it's disrupting are the industries that you used to have to go to college for 7 years to learn, like science, healthcare, legal, so doctors, lawyers, scientists are all using it at the moment for positively, but ultimately finding the machine does it better. Watson has a great advert that said it's able to process 36,000 pieces of legislation in less than a second. We can't do that. Humans can't do that. So machines are now learning from machines. So machine learning is a type of artificial intelligence that provides computers with the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. So this is not humans telling it what to do, this is the machine figuring out what to do for itself. And if you go on YouTube, there are actually videos of robots learning how to cook by looking at YouTube. Watching YouTube videos. We're at the point here, artificial intelligence have gained the ability to generate learning between activities. They're getting smarter. So we've got robots that are teaching other robots how to do new things. And in fact, I was listening very recently to this gentleman, Alex Harvey, who's the head of robotics and autonomous systems for a company called Ocado in the UK. Ocado is an online retailer, and they're fighting back against Amazon. Everyone thought Amazon was going to kill them when they moved into the UK, and they're fighting back. They're fighting back by changing themselves from a retailer to a robotics company. And he made this statement. I wrote it down when he said it because I thought it was brilliant. He said, the problem we have is dealing with the uncertainties. When you have all of these data signals, is managing the uncertainties. Is we simply can't write enough if, then, else statements to cover all of these different scenarios, so we allow machines to do it for us. And the final thing here that's happening is quantum computing. So normal computing is a 1 and a 0. We're talking about quantum computing, which qubits, 1 and 0 at the same time, which exponentially increases the processing power. And you can buy them already. The D-Wave is available for sale. So they're using quantum computing. And this is going to change everything. This is not just a little bit smarter computer. And I like the quote at the bottom there. Today's conventional computing technology compared to reading every book in the library one by one, quantum computing technology is comparable to reading every book in the library at the same time. So forget being a forecaster. Anyone here in demand planning? Put your hands in the air. Unlucky. Okay. Because machines, you think Amazon's able to deliver stuff in an hour by having a planner figure it out? This has been done by machines. They're smarter than us, and it wants your highly skilled job. It's happening already. Stock exchange, areas like this, stock trading, is being done now by machines. This headline here, JP Morgan software does in seconds what it took lawyers 360,000 hours. Imagine the number of billable hours that took from JP Morgan that was done in seconds by a machine. And it's already started. This is not something that's going to happen, this is something that is happening. You see here already. This one particularly made me laugh. Where was it? Staff invited to make way for robots. So basically they were invited to say, do you think a robot could do your job better? Put your hands in the air. I don't think many people volunteered themselves for that one. But you can see how it's impacting it. 250,000 UK public sector workers about to be replaced. So maybe your law degree might be the worst decision ever. And that's actually what's happening. And we're in the US, people get themselves in massive amounts of debt with degrees that ultimately are for jobs that aren't going to be there. Anyone doing an MBA at the moment? You know, we're talking about industrial level management. Well, maybe we're in a pre-industrial world now. And what's happening is we're on an exponential curve. So this is just starting. So we're moving from intelligence augmentation into artificial intelligence, into artificial general intelligence, into what you call artificial superintelligence. So around about 2015, they said AI had the intelligence of a rodent. So I didn't feel too threatened at that point in time, although some would doubt that. Around about 2018, so next year, we're talking about getting chimp-like intelligence. At 2019, the cast of a reality TV show will be matched. Yeah. And about 2029, they think our genius-level intelligence will be there. But the really scary thing is this, the point of technological singularity at 2045, when they think AI will basically replicate the intelligence of the entire planet, all humans. There are worrying signs already. It's almost as if no one's ever watched a sci-fi movie, ever. Because what they're finding out is that AI is so smart that the people who programmed it originally now don't understand how it reaches its conclusions. And I use this word, I think I stole it from Jurassic Park. We were so preoccupied whether we could, we never stopped to think whether or not we should. There's some very worrying signals here. Google's Alice AI started sending messages to another AI system. It wasn't asked to do that. It just suddenly decided, and they were encrypted. So it's talking to other AIs in secret. It invented its own encryption. Its creator doesn't understand how complex it is. This one here was quite interesting. They put AI into a fighter simulator and put it against the 5 best US fighter pilots. And the AI wiped them out in seconds. They didn't even score a hit on it. Because it used tactics, a bit like AlphaGo. If you watch the AlphaGo thing that's happened recently, where we thought, at Go, the Deep Blue, Kasparov got beaten back in the 90s with Deep Blue, and they said, well, chess is one game, and there's rules to it. Go, oldest game in the world, 2,500-year-old game, so complicated, it will never, ever, ever be able to beat us, a human, at that, until it kicked its ass 4-1. The Lee Sol, I think the chap's name was. Very recently, they had a team of 5 Go experts have a go at beating AI, and AI destroyed them all. But they put it into this fighter pilot, and the reason I mention that is because it's very same. The way it beat the human was it did things that humans wouldn't do. So all the strategies that we'd grown up to believe were the right ways, win the corners first, never surrender those. In the Go, it basically threw the rule book out. And what happened with the AI and the pilots was it was so aggressive. It did things that humans just wouldn't normally do. They had 5 goes at beating this AI system, and it wiped them out. And the total time it took was about 2.5 minutes over those 5 attempts to kill everyone else in the air. But hey, don't worry about that. So will AI disregard its original purpose and start evolving its own? I ask you the question, how much of your parents' original purpose are you following right now? But this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're only at the tipping point. So we now have robotics and 3D printing that allows us to print things cheaper, faster, and more accurate than you. We have autonomous vehicles that are safer and cheaper than you, and we have AI and cognitive computing that is smarter than you. This is the wave of oncoming technology. So this is Gartner's hype cycle. I have never seen so many technologies all clustered in one place about to hit. We haven't even got started yet. And the next stage, triple threat number 3, is the fact they're all converging. So we're using data analytics in order to pour it into artificial intelligence to run robotics and computers to decide what to make. All these technologies are converging. We now have, this is Local Motors who produce this, Ollie. This is a bus that's 3D printed, and it's electric, and it's autonomous, and it has Watson's AI in it as well. Technologies converging together. Companies like Amazon are using it to reinvent the entire end-to-end supply chain. Completely new business models. While you're still playing catch-up on the 20th century business, they're reinventing the 21st. The 6th wave has also created a new consumer mindset. Millennials now are less interested in ownership. Next, a clothing company in the UK basically said, our sales are tanking because we don't think people want to buy stuff in the same way. They're not so interested in owning things in the way we used to be. So it's causing the rise of called the subscription economy. People just want access. And this is where we're going to hit the car industry. All I need is to move from A to B. I don't need to own an asset that depreciates greatly. There is now a war to survive. Companies are having to use automation in order to fend off new competitors, and so are economies. And this is a cry out to the South African economy. If you want to be part of the future, invent it. Otherwise, it will come to you, and you won't be ready. Because most companies are not set up for the future. They're not structured. They have a hierarchical, top-down business model where the guy at the top does all the thinking and everyone else is supposed to do all the doing. They're tied to their existing asset base. So companies like Kodak that got so attached to their film processing capabilities, despite the fact they were the guys who invented digital photography, and now no more. Technology is undermining consistently the advantages of scale. Labor costs have become less and less relevant. So companies need to basically behave like a digital software company. We need to do entrepreneurial, small teams, work with the DNA of a digital organization, or be replaced. Because by the time it's apparent that you need to change, it's usually too late. Jack Walsh, ex-CEO of General Electric, said, if the rate of change on the outside of the corporation is faster than the rate of change on the inside, the end is nigh. And the outside's moving really fast right now. So the future supply chain is going to be personalized. Consumers are going to become creators. The Internet of Things, AI is going to create a world of devices. Remember your personal preferences. Mass production is going to be replaced by customization and configuration. Industry 4.0 coming out of Germany, but it's going to be this new cyber-physical supply chain. The mantra is to create a batch size of 1. It's going to be automated, as we've just seen, end-to-end, top-down automation, from 3D printing to digital products on demand, robotic production to autonomous vehicle delivery. And it's going to be localized. So the economies of scale of having large numbers of very cheap people the other side of the world making stuff for us is disappearing, because actually the transport costs are a bigger part of the issue. Plus the fact they have to make in big batches. People are going to make much more locally. Production is going to be reshored near the consumer. We're going to have big area additive manufacturing centers in towns, micro-logistic networks. If I can order something in 1 hour, the logistics is going to have to be quite close to me. An interesting example, I'll give you an example of what can happen. I'm a Prime member for Amazon. In the UK, you get Prime Now, which gives you 1 hour delivery. I came here, and I left my office in Canary Wharf in London. I had to catch the train back to Birmingham. It's a 2-hour train journey. And I opened up my bag to plug in my phone, to charge my phone. I realized I left my charger at home. Idiot. But great, I'm going to fly to South Africa, I haven't got a phone charger. Haha, remembered I was a Prime Now, went onto my phone, checked, bought 2 Prime Apple chargers and an adapter, had it delivered, came off the train, walked down my path. As I was walking down the path, basically Uber-style driver came alongside me, handed me a parcel. I didn't even have to make 1 step. I walked into the house, the wife said, what you got in your hands? And I was like, some new phone chargers. When did you order them? 1 hour, 15 minutes ago. That's what you're dealing with. It's going to generate enormous amounts of wealth in industries that don't exist right now. I haven't even mentioned things like artificial reality or virtual reality on virtual products yet. It's just simply for time, but it's going to create enormous amounts of revenue. The robotic market has been bubbling under. It's now rising exponentially. And the impact this is having is that labor costs are going to fall, production costs are going to fall, transportation costs are going to fall, because it's going to be transporting stuff at the cost of electricity. And if there's no dude in the car, I don't need to pay for the dude in the car, or the van, or the truck, or whatever. So storage costs are going to drop. Some economists, like Jeremy Rifkin here, say we're going to move to a zero marginal cost economy. Because back in the 1950s, labor was very cheap, but data was expensive, and then that flipped. But by 2025, both of those is effectively going to be free. The question, of course, is, this is new technology, new business models, new mindsets, but how many new jobs? Let's take this as an example. Kodak used to be known for capturing memories. Instagram is now known for capturing memories. That went bust, and when at peak it had 145,300 employees. That was bought by Facebook. At the peak, it had 13 employees. WhatsApp has 700 million customers and a £19 billion valuation. Only 55 people work there. The reshoring revolution is underway. So Nike already has taken 106,000 workers out from the emerging nations and took them back to the US. Only 106,000 jobs didn't appear. Only about 200. And we saw Adidas making robots. Let's take autonomous vehicles as an example. Let's look at creative destruction from an autonomous vehicle. I mean, the creative side is fantastic. It's going to give us mobility for all, regardless of whether or not you're old, or you're disabled, or you're blind, or you're drunk, or you're blind drunk. You can get home safely. But the destruction side, Uber begins its endgame, replacing humans. We're going to really impact the car. Will cars be assets we own? I don't think they will. But they will have to be replaced more regularly because these things will be moving consistently. They're not going to be parked up 95% of the time. If we look at the US as an example, though, look at the most popular job for most states. Truck driving. Second one, retail assistants. And we've already seen the potential to replace retail assistants. How many taxi drivers at the moment work in the US who won't need to in 5 years' time? So jobs are changing, but the skills. So we've got this really paradoxical situation about the hit where we're going to have massive technological unemployment and a skills shortage all at the same time. Because people don't have the skills to do these new jobs. But the guy from Ocado, when he was talking, the question was asked, I said, are you going to retrain your warehouseman? And he said, well, no, of course I'm not. I can't retrain a guy whose job it is to pick and move stuff, to be a machine learning specialist. This is a completely exponential different skill set. Of course they're not. They're just going to go. And he was so honest about it, but it was true. You can't say, yeah, we'll move them other parts in the company because they don't have the skills. So there's the big challenge. You know, we might be in this kind of situation pretty soon. So even the concept of work itself, even under threat. A lot of people think it is. We've got headlines. I mean, these are just a few. There's thousands. Really, particularly, very famous study here from Oxford Martin School said half of US jobs are going to be replaced by computerization. China is smart enough to realize that its competitive advantage is not a competitive advantage anymore. It's got an aging population, but it's also got a lot of people, and at the moment it's been trading off the fact those people will work for very little money. But that's changing because wages are increasing. It knows robotics in the future. So it's seriously working on robotics and working with companies like Baxter and other companies, but it's fully replacing humans with robots of companies like Foxconn. Foxconn employs over 1 million people. And it's trying to replace pretty much all of them with robots. This is creating a potential time bomb for emerging nations because they want their industrial revolution. We want the same gig we've got in the UK, we've got in Europe, you've got in the US. We want to come from the farming industries, and we want to come to the city, and we'll do a job, and it'll be a crappy job, but it'll get us on the, allow us to earn money in order to become consumers, to become, to drive the middle class. So it's creating some really concerning headlines. Because machines might be great producers, but they're also very, very poor consumers. They don't pay much tax either. In fact, a lot of people are questioning whether or not our current capitalist economic model is actually future fit, and whether or not we need something. There's a lot of talk around universal basic income. Maybe we need to just give people money to survive. So maybe we're looking at a socialism by automation future. Because there's a gap. This technology is increasing at an exponential rate, but we don't. The ability for us to adapt and understand what's going on is very linear. I don't know what's going on this lunchtime, let alone what's going on in the future. Blimey. So some people are saying, well, the only way we're going to be able to keep up is by merging with machines. And this is really interesting. I would suggest you have a look at this if you get a chance. Neural lace. So this is sort of blending of sort of human brain power with electric components and using that in order to be able to keep up. It's happening right now. There's a big movement called transhumanism, who really, really believe that, we're talking millions of people who really believe that the future is us merging with machines. So in industrial thinking, industrial education, industrial management really isn't working in a digital world. So our schools need to change, our education systems need to change, our taxation methods need to change in order to adapt to this new future. And some companies are getting it. Finland basically is getting rid of all school subjects. It's saying, I'm not going to teach you how to read, write, and do the basics. You tell me what you want to learn, because by the time we teach you something, it's out of date. So you determine your own education. Governments are plowing millions in the UK, putting 20 million into AI, research, and robots and driverless cars, because they know that's the future. That's where economies are going. Like this headline here from the chap from Argentina. A child today can expect to change jobs 7 times over the career, and 5 of those jobs don't exist yet. So what should we do? Should we break the machines once again? Like the Luddites? I would say no. Go back through history, look at any society that's stopped innovation, it's failed. From the Ottoman empires to the Chinese dynasties, it might stop, but the rest of the world doesn't. We need to develop the skills and the capabilities to work with this technology. We need to learn how to adapt to technology, not just adopt technology. Because making machines smart is the easy bit. Making a societal model that provides for 7 billion humans in a world of smart machines is not so easy. So I leave you with some questions. Is your supply chain ready for this? Is your company ready for this? And as I started with the opening question, are you ready? Thank you.